while Irma was a tropical storm, when she hit, the storm surge is the storm surge of a Category 3 hurricane. So we quickly mobilized and moved our search and rescue teams into getting people out of areas we had asked them to, frankly, to evacuate. We've got state assets helping us, and we're just trying to do everything that we can to get people safe. I've been out around the city today and have witnessed these heroes getting people out of their homes, and it's going to continue.
Are there enough state and federal, local resources on the ground, Mr. Mayor, in Jacksonville at this point?
The governor of the state of Florida, Rick Scott, we were on the phone early this morning. He mobilized resources immediately. Our local fire department and rescue workers were already on it. So, yes, we are. Our men and women are getting it done. We're asking the people of Jacksonville not to take this lightly. If they think that as the tides go down that these floodwaters are going to recede from their homes if they're on a second story, it's not going to happen anytime soon. We've asked them to call our local city helpline if they need help, and obviously if it's an emergency, call 911. Put a white towel or a white flag or something that represents that on your home that we can see from the road so we can come get you.
A lot of people from South Florida actually decided they were going to evacuate to Jacksonville, which raises the question, was all of this a surprise for you and other authorities? Was Jacksonville prepared for the enormity of this storm?
We were absolutely prepared, and you're seeing that work in action right now. We started strong voluntary evacuations on Wednesday. I told people these are voluntary, but they're going to be mandatory, and I'm giving them to you this early because there's going to be so much traffic coming through our city with the South Florida evacuations. By Friday, I said, I told you this was coming. You need to go. And then we woke up this morning, and we had the information that this storm surge impact was going to be this significant in those areas. We used that information, and we mobilized our teams and continue to do that to put the safety of the people of Jacksonville first.
I guess the question is, Mr. Mayor, did you expect the worst flooding ever in Jacksonville?
We didn't have information that gave us the worst flooding ever. We didn't have information that told us that there would be a Cat 3 storm surge in a tropical storm. But what we did know is that this was going to be a serious weather event, that this was going to be life-threatening. We told people that, and we made it mandatory that they leave. And these are the areas that are being impacted now. Low-lying areas, the zones that we evacuated. But what's most important now is the people that are there, that we continue to get them out of there and get them into shelters and get them into safe places.
As bad as the damage right now. So
while we didn't know the specific...
Go ahead, Mayor. Finish your thought.
So while the information did not suggest a Category 3 storm surge, we certainly prepared for the worst and communicated that with people. Asked them to leave, asked them to go to shelters and be in safe places, and had our rescue teams ready and mobilized, and we moved immediately and continue to move.
Lenny Curry is the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, a beautiful city, an important city in Florida and in the country, I should say, as well. Mr. Mayor, good luck to you. Good luck to all the folks in Jacksonville. We'll stay in close touch.
Pray for us, and we're going to keep working hard. Thank you.
We certainly will. Thank you. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Al Lawson of Florida. His district, by the way, stretches from Jacksonville all the way across North Florida to Tallahassee. Congressman, how extensive is the damage in your district?
It's pretty severe. I really would like to congratulate and thank Mayor Curry for all the work that they've been doing down there. This is a magnitude damage that we really never thought would happen in Jacksonville. And for the quick response that we had in Jacksonville is very significant in the rescue mode to save as many people as we possibly can. You know, Wolf, it's hard to believe that the most devastating damage is in Key West and in Jacksonville. That was not the way it supposed to have been predicted. So throughout the district, you know, we have in this district a lot of people on food dependence program. So it's very important that, you know, we petition the federal government through the state of Florida to make sure that people on food stamps be able to get a hot meal and that they would not be turned around when they go to restaurants and so forth because they have young kids, and it's very significant. So we're still in a rescue mode here in Jacksonville, and the flooding has just been devastating. I know the mayor was out on boats today, rescuing people. So we're not in recovery yet, but still in rescue mode.
In addition to getting food to people, to those who need it, what's your other biggest concern in the coming hours?
Well, healthcare is making sure that the hospitals are functioning well to get people there. And as I hear from colleagues across the country, they're ready to get back in Washington and vote for emergency assistance. What we really need, we need Florida to join, Jacksonville to be with other counties for emergency relief that I think that we can get so funds can actually come down to help the city through the state of Florida so we can get in this recovery stage.
We wish you and all your constituents only the best. Good luck, Congressman Al Lawson, Democrat of Florida. We have a lot more coming up in the breaking news. As Irma moves north, communities left battered by the storm begin to assess the damage. We're going to take you to places where there has been very significant impact.
I'm CAT. You might know me from here. Trump has a history of misunderstanding the role of the press. Average voters want kitchen table issues discussed. But now I'm here on HLN.
CAT Unfiltered, weeknights at 7 on HLN.
Hello? No one asked us to go. Not friends. Not family.
Hello.
No one asked us to go.
That you would typically see on a typical day. The question is, does this water get pushed enough to cause flooding? Even if it does, hopefully not as much as we would have expected. So probably still first responders out. I want to let you know, by the way, these guys never came off. The guys in Madeira Beach, they continued to patrol all night.
Is that a ghost town, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Bobby, can you come this way? If you hang your, see, we got cable now. This is like the old days. If Bob's able to hang his head out the side, do you see anything, Aaron? Not a doggone thing. That's that place over there has a big generator. Beach Place has a generator. That's the only power that you see. Occasionally somebody will have a generator and you can see that, but beyond that, total ghost town. That's off to the left, Bob. That's Treasure Island over there. This bridge joins the two. That also ghost town. When you're on a barrier island here, if you're in Tampa, you might say, oh, I think I'll stick it out. If you're on a barrier island, you're saying, you know what? We'll come back on a nicer day.
Even in a hurricane, the place is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I know the surge continues, but I was expecting, Jeff, to see just all of those roads, all of those docks completely underwater. I was expecting to see a lot of like what we saw in Harvey.
Guys brought in this parking garage. By the way, this is where we spent the night, in this parking garage over here. You still with me, Bob? I gotta be with Bob now because we're connected. In this parking garage, you can't see them from here, but they brought rafts, they brought canoes, they brought ski-doos, whatever the heck it is, because they expected to be in this road going up and down the road. By not walking. So,
well, they were prepared.
We're prepared.
And you just never know.
Yes.
All right. Jeff Flock and Bob the cameraman, thank you very much.
Yeah. And so let's now take you to our Miami station, WFOR. They've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting covering this because it is obviously their backyard. Let's go ahead and listen into their coverage.
See what's going on here and just take a look. This is Treasure Island. And we really haven't seen a lot of police officers clearing the road. It was just that one in North Miami Beach, but I'm sure that now that the sun has come up, we will definitely be seeing a lot more of them.
And Maribel, just talk about some of the conditions you encountered. I know you've been driving around there in that northeastern part of the county there, but tell us what you were dealing with as you made your way from the northwestern part here in Doral, and you had to cross over. It looks like you're running into some flooding there, so be careful.
Yeah, there's a bump here. There's a bump here on the road. So it's kind of like dodging a lot of trees and debris, and that's why you have to be very careful. But we drove from Doral, and we first drove to North Miami Beach, 826, I-95, completely isolated, which is great because obviously it was still under the curfew. Then we went to Aventura. We went to Aventura Mall. They were clearing the storm drains there. Still a lot of downed trees. As far as businesses, we haven't seen any businesses open. We drove by the Publix in Miami Shores. That is still closed. And we also went by a trailer park. We sent that video earlier. I don't know if you were able to turn it around to show it to our viewers. But, yeah, I mean, just a lot of water everywhere. And here there is still some water.
Yeah,
I want to say maybe like 1 to 2 feet of water in this area.
Yeah, you could tell by looking at the tires on that car how high up it comes. And we've seen some cars as you drive around also out there. Have you seen any people, just out of curiosity, walking around? I imagine that this was part of the area that was evacuated for the storm.
Well, you see there's a resident right there. I don't know if she stayed or if she's just getting home.
I know. Also now getting hit in the areas where the storm has passed. Officials are assessing the damage. CNN's Brian Todd is on Marco Island in Florida for us, southwest part of the state. Brian, what are you seeing there?
Just a lot of debris and damage all over this place. Wolf, this is the Goodland neighborhood of Marco Island. We're told that this was really a neighborhood that got much of the brunt of the storm when it hit yesterday as a Category 3. Some neighbors here told us that they had 7-foot storm surges just down the street a little bit. Houses here had water about 3 to 4 feet, maybe waist high. Look at some of the damage here. That part of the metal roof just got torn off of that home there. I mean, this is really seen all over this neighborhood. There is debris all over the place. Look over there. You've got these just downed trees that are going to take a long time to clear out here. This digging out process, of course, is just beginning because we're less than 24 hours off this storm. But we're told that hundreds of people live on Marco Island, at least in this section of it, year-round, but only about 40 chose to ride it out. And thankfully, no serious injuries here. We can also talk about another place we went to not far away from here, Bonita Springs, Florida. It's about halfway between Fort Myers and Naples. A stoic little community kind of sandwiched between those two cities. Well, we went there earlier today and saw just some devastating flooding, most of it hitting a mobile home neighborhood called the Bonita Estates. When we got to the edge of the neighborhood, we came upon a lady who was the caretaker of the mobile homes, and she was visibly worried. She said there's an elderly couple in there deep into the neighborhood. They didn't want to leave. I don't know if they're alive or not. They might have drowned. She was visibly shaken by this. So we got directions from her as to where the couple lived. And she gave directions. We walked through this neighborhood, really trudged through it because the water was waist deep in most places. And the water, by the way, is almost dangerous just to be in because it's so just toxic. It's got, oil all over the place, other chemicals, garbage. We get through there. We go a mile into the neighborhood, finally get to these people's houses, and we knocked on the door of this one elderly couple's house, and they were okay. They had ridden out the storm. The woman is 88 years old. Her husband's 93. He has diabetes and Parkinson's disease. They did not want to leave. She said it would be just too difficult to get him out, but they had a close call. The water was lapping toward the top of their step. Others we have some video of it. Other mobile homes there were completely inundated. Well, at least one we saw was completely overturned. So this is the kind of stuff that they're waking up to today in this region of Florida, Wolf. And, the mayor of Bonita Springs told me, quote, "We're just trying to get our arms around this at this point." He was sending people out to that neighborhood where we were, sheriff's deputies and others, just to check and see if people were alive, Wolf. So this is what much of this region of Florida is dealing with.
A very awful situation. All right, Brian. Thank you. Brian Todd reporting. CNN's Diane Gallagher is on the road in Bradenton, Florida, on the state's Gulf Coast. She's joining us right now. Diane, what are you seeing?
So sort of similar, really, Wolf, to what Brian was saying. I want to give you a look from our roaming coverage vehicle, and you can see on the side here, lots of downed trees in Bradenton. They experienced quite a bit of those high winds coming in from Irma, those big gusts. And so today, since they were under curfew until about 3 p.m. in this area, you've seen a lot of people out kind of chopping up those vehicles. Now, we have to be very careful going through that because they're also dealing with a lot of sewage spills in this area. A lot of this standing water is unfortunately mixed with sewage. Some of that has to do with the trees that are coming up. We can kind of go through this neighborhood here, but you can see on the line, lining the streets, lots of trees, lots of palm trees, fronds, things like that. Much of this is the reason why more than half the county does not have power. And if you see here, a little bit earlier today, we're at the base of this tree. We're going to stop a bit. This tree here caused a massive sewage spill. The county and other workers coming in trying to get this fixed right now because they don't have water. They don't have electricity. Now, I can tell you that they were trapped. This family, I spoke to them a little bit earlier. They were trapped in their home. So they went on Facebook asking if people had things that could help them get the tree, away from their driveway so they could get out. Neighbors came. You can see people already out on the jet skis at this area at this point now. But neighbors came. They brought over fuel. They got this together. They got it out of the road because it was blocking the street. We're going to go over here, over the Warner Bayou East, and let you see, because this water over here, the bayou, Wolf, this is what they were afraid was going to be the problem, because they'd heard about this storm surge from Irma that was going to come and threaten them. They were all prepared for flooding, but it was the winds, of course, that got this particular area. Bradenton, I can tell you that we're going to be trying to go to one of the islands that has been closed up until recently, the bridges. It's right across the bay there, to see and survey the damage there. And we perhaps will be able to get a little more information on just what they're experiencing on that island pretty soon. Wolf?
All right, Diane. Thank you. Diane Gallagher driving around. We're getting some new video just coming in. Take a look at this flooding in Orlando, Florida. Wow, you can see the damage already done in Orlando, Florida. Apparently, this is only just the beginning. Look at this video coming in, courtesy WKMG in Orlando. You see the streets under water over there. And it's like that, not just in Orlando, but in so many other parts of the state, especially in Jacksonville, Florida right now. We'll stay on top of this. There's a lot more coming up, including new dangers, new damage as Tropical Storm Irma moves inland with tropical storm force winds. We'll have an updated forecast and a lot more on the breaking news coverage right after this.
See it like this is just so devastating. Now we're going to go ahead and keep driving around here and hopefully be able to bring you some more live video and show you what we're seeing down here, guys.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Please stay safe out there. Your safety is #1 priority, but thanks for bringing us.
A lot of people have been asking what happened in Marco Island overnight, and this is what happened. If you can believe it, a palm tree just completely snapped in half here, making a perfect 90-degree angle, and we continue to find these pieces of metal all over this property. We're at the Old South condo off of South Collier Boulevard. You can see it all along the grass here, right? Well, if you come this way, you'll see what happened. The tree fell right onto the carport here and just demolished it. You can see the garbage cans over here also turned. There's a lot of glass on the ground here, and that's because parts of that carport actually hit the cars. You can see right here, right through this person's car. And we just talked to a neighbor who lives here who said, this used to be a carport, all right here. Oh, watch out there. All right here was a carport, and right behind you, Prina, also, this also was a carport, and now it's gone, and we don't even know where it is. It's not on the property anymore. That just goes to show you how strong those winds were. We're going to bring you over here as well. Now, we're kind of walking this for the first time with you. We just arrived here. We've been driving down South Collier Boulevard, and we've seen a lot of trees down in the middle of the road, but this is probably the worst destruction we've seen so far. If you turn the camera right here, you can see also the gate down on top of some of the bikes here. It just goes to show you how strong those winds were. It's a little ladder here, and then just to the left over here you can see more of that carport as well. Just, it's gone. It's totally down here in Marco Island. And we talked to one guy also in another condo. He lived on the 19th floor. He lives on the 19th floor off of South Collier Boulevard. Hear what he had to say about the noise of that wind last night.
I have shutters on all our windows and the balcony, so you can't see anything. You don't know what's going on. It's all you hear is the noise and the banging, things banging, hitting the windows and hitting the shutters. But we'll be okay, I'm sure.
And that wind, the sound of the wind is the scariest part.
It is. It sounds like a freight train coming through. Then the eye came through, and it got nice and calm, so we came out and looked out over the balcony to see what was going on. But I think, all in all, I think we were lucky.
it's a mess out here. I mean, the backyard of this property, you can just find the little pieces of metal everywhere. And we've also been trying to pick it up just to kind of show you how heavy it is. I mean, you can tell that a big storm came through here. But I got to tell you, our whole drive down here, a lot of trees, a lot of signs down, but it could be so much worse. And you just heard from that man there. He agrees. A lot of people are coming out for the very first time today, out walking their dogs. The sun is finally out. And a lot of them are really relieved that Marco Island wasn't hit as bad as they thought. Guys?
You know, Michelle, one thing that a lot of people are wondering, and we were trying to get an idea of the roadway, since you did drive down from Naples, there was a lot of debris. Were there any roads that were completely impassable, and do you remember what those roads were?
So when we left our hotel, we went down Airport Pulling Road, then forgive me if I'm not right here, but Airport Pulling, I think, to 41, and then to Collier Boulevard. And we did pass probably 2 or 3 trees that did completely block the road, but that was hours ago, and there are a lot of emergency crews out there. So I got to say, I bet those trees are out of the way now. We've seen quite a few people out in their cars now that we're on Marco. A lot of people curious and driving around. There's one tree out on South Collier Boulevard that we weren't able to pass. We had to actually go around it, and other cars were doing the same thing because there aren't a lot of cars on the road. Some people are going on the other side of the road to get around those trees. So it's, you know, it's still not very safe to be out. If you don't have to come out, I would stay inside. There's a couple wires down on those roads in Naples on our way here. So again, I mean, just take your time, stay inside and wait till, you know, emergency crews and our crews tell you that it's okay to go out there. But I got to say, there's not a lot of flooding. We did not see a lot of water. There's, you know, some puddles and stuff on the sides of the roads, but nothing that was impassable for us aside from those trees.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much for that update. It's really great to see the sun shining on your face and that conditions are clearing and that, you know, people are going to be cleaning up. But considering it's one of the hardest hit areas, it's nice to see that you were able to get there and that the sun is out for cleanup. So we appreciate that update. And we want to send
Yeah, we are in Southwest Cape Coral in the Tarpon Gardens neighborhood. It's just a few feet away from the Westin and the Tarpon Point Marina. Neighbors waking up to find some of the destruction from Hurricane Irma. If you look just behind me, you can see there's a tree that was ripped out of the ground. That just giving you an indication as to how strong these winds were just in this neighborhood alone. And if we keep walking this way, you can see we've got some branches here. These are, you know, sort of scattered around the neighborhood. We've seen, my photographer Ben and I have seen probably at least a dozen trees just in this neighborhood alone that were ripped out of the ground. You can see the roots that are showing on the bottom. It's really impressive and again gives you an indication of how strong those winds were. But we wanted to walk over this way to show you guys this. You can see, you know, metal bent from the winds of Hurricane Irma. This is part of the gate that opens up to this community. And the winds just bending this gate. And this is metal, guys. This is how strong these winds were that they were able to bend this. But guys, the good news here, if there is any good news, I was talking with some neighbors here, they are actually relieved. This is part of the Zone A mandatory evacuation area. This was an area that had the potential to see a lot of storm surge, but thankfully the roads are dry today and neighbors waking up finding no water in their homes, so that is the good news. Again, neighbors I spoke with already this morning, they're coming out, they're surveying their homes, they're trying to assess the damage around where they live, but for now they're telling me they are relieved. They're thankful that as of right now, you know, there is no water in their homes, and that is the good news here for now in Southwest Cape Coral. In Cape Coral, Brooke Schaefer, Wink News now.
All right, Brooke. To rise. There's actually a current here in the middle of this street, which is just in front of some restaurants and a legal office. There are basically white caps. If you look down at the end of this road, as some very, very strong winds, some of these tropical force winds continue to bring this St. John's River water, this storm surge in toward us.
The humanity at the center of this. And right now, there's so much concern over lost humanity. Officially, only a couple fatalities so far in the Keys, but Facebook has lists of hundreds now of people who are missing, and we don't know whether they are perished in the storm or they're like the rest of us, they just can't get a cell signal. I mean, I'm using a satellite phone here because everything south of here, we're at like mile marker I believe we're around mile marker 88 or 87 here. And everything south of us for 80 miles, it just gets harder and harder. And so you have to physically go find your family member, and the roads are impassable. Even the waterways have so much debris in them, it's sort of perilous to navigate through that. There is a dusk to dawn curfew right now. The Navy is sending in the USS Lincoln, the aircraft carrier, naval personnel to help out with humanitarian aid. But the search and rescue effort right now is really weighs most on the minds as people wonder about their loved ones, Wolf, and what became of them in Irma.
What a heartbreaking development, and that's just one little part of the state. Can only imagine what's going on throughout the state. Bill Weir, we're going to get back to you, but right now I want to show our viewers once again these pictures coming in from Orlando, Florida. These are streets now flooded in Orlando. Live pictures courtesy of our affiliate WKMG. You see what's going on in Orlando and Jacksonville. John Berman has been covering all of this from the very beginning. John, dare I say that the folks in Orlando and Jacksonville, look at these live pictures, were not necessarily expecting this kind of flooding disaster?
I think part of the story, Wolf, is that this storm spared no one. And if anyone thought they might have it easy, they're finding out otherwise. Look, think back to the forecast we got repeatedly from Chad Myers and Tom Sater. The cone of the hurricane was always over the whole state of Florida, the whole peninsula, so everyone knew they might be at risk. Nevertheless, first, the people here where I am in Miami, the Miami area, thought they might get a direct hit, and then the storm kept moving left. And it turned out to make that direct hit on the Keys, where we just saw Bill Weir file that heartbreaking story right there, and then made the turn over the southwest and then over the peninsula, hitting places like Orlando. That was a site that many people from here left for safety, left Miami to go to Orlando for safety. It's the city where they staged so much of the aid for the rest of the state. Trucks, pallets full of water were stored in warehouses in Orlando to be distributed after the fact to the rest of the state. But now you're looking at these pictures and you can tell that Orlando was frankly not spared. It's still the right place to stage things because it's closer. It's the middle point. You can get to everywhere you need to go. And then the fact that the storm went over to Jacksonville and gave that city historic flooding, again, just shows you we are talking about a statewide event here, Wolf, and one that will take the entire resources of this state and the country, frankly, to recover from.
Yes, indeed. All right, John, stand by. HLN anchor Mike Galanos is in Orlando right now. Mike, what have you been seeing there?
Well, I had a chance, Wolf, to go into a neighborhood where there was flooding. And to John's point, many people in Orlando were watching Chris Cuomo in the height of the storm earlier in the day Sunday and did not think we here in Orlando were going to get walloped like we did, but it happened. And in the neighborhood I went to, Wolf, it's about 5 miles from where I am now. I'm in downtown Orlando. It's about 5 miles west. Flanking this neighborhood is a couple of lakes and a retention pond. Well, with hour after hour of rain, the water just didn't hold. Next thing you know, the water is pouring into homes a foot high, 3 feet high, up to the chest of some people. And this is happening at the height of the storm and the winds, 2, 3 in the morning. So they need help. So the next thing you know, the National Guard is there, Orange County Fire and Rescue, and they're using boats and they're getting people out of there. So, and they were thankful to get out of there. I saw some people waving as we arrived early in the morning on a National Guard truck. And then the next phase, as we see these, again, pictures of flooding, is what next? This one gentleman, just so gracious, but yet so heartbroken, allowed us into his home. And he said it was a lake coming through his home in the middle of the night, just washing away all those things, as Bill Weir was talking about moments ago, that make life good. And that's what people are dealing with really across the state.
Yeah, a lot of people in South Florida, whether Miami or Fort Lauderdale, they drove up to Orlando thinking that was going to be a pretty secure part of the state to ride this all out. We see these live pictures coming in right now. A significant flooding in Orlando. HLN anchor Mike Galanos, thank you very much. We'll touch back to you shortly. Coming up, the increasingly urgent search and rescue effort along the Florida coast right now. We're standing by for an update from the U.S. Coast Guard.
So that they can get back on, because again, there is still a lot of flooding and there's a lot of debris everywhere. People do not have electricity for the most part. The street lights are out. So very serious situation, as we're now being able to see because of daylight, and officials warning people again to stay inside, but allowing them access to leave Atlantic Beach.
Where are you, and what's the damage like where you are?
Stephanie, we're in Florida City. This is the last stop before you reach the Keys, and I'm sure you can hear the buzzing over there. They have already started to remove some of these downed trees. This is one of the biggest ones in the area that's blocking the road. In terms of flooding, you can take a look. We don't have much flooding, but this entire neighborhood is without power. They have boarded up their homes, and the home behind me was boarded up as well. But a lot of these people, they did not evacuate. I talked to one gentleman who said he didn't have enough money to get gas, and he didn't have enough room in his small car for all of his family members. Take a look over here. More trees down. This is what we've been seeing street after street. A lot of palm branches and trees. We also saw some down dangling power lines as well. A lot of these residents have been coming through, surveying the damage. They know it could have been a lot worse. Stephanie?
Yeah, Meg, you tried to, I understand, also get to the Florida Keys earlier. We were just saying how that was the first place to see landfall here in the United States. How far did you get in that journey, and what did you see on the way?
So, Stephanie, we got right up to the checkpoint where the Monroe County Sheriffs turned us away, along with dozens and dozens of local residents who are lined up there. They're hot, they're tired, they're trying to get back to check on their homes. And right now, they have to make sure the bridges are clear. They have to make sure the roads are clear before they let anyone back in. I talked to a couple people there who are literally sitting out in the hot sun, eating tortillas and trying to pass the time. They are very frustrated. And one person told me she won't evacuate again if she can't get back in quicker next time. Let me show you over here. Now that the buzzing has stopped, they stopped just for a minute, but this tree is just so massive, and this is the kind of damage that we're seeing all over the place.
Wow.
When we left Doral, which is in North Miami, we basically just had to weave in and around trees just like this one to make it onto the highway. But once we got on the highway, it was smooth sailing, and we made it all the way down until Florida City when we got stopped. They're hoping to let those residents in later this afternoon.
Now, Meg, I know that you also covered Hurricane Harvey, which of course hit the Houston area just a few weeks ago. Can you compare the damage you're seeing today, the day after Irma made landfall in Florida, and what you saw in Houston, and some of the differences and similarities?
Stephanie, it's very different where we have been traveling today, because in Houston, it was a huge flood event. Here, the water seems to have receded quite a bit already. Both cities, low-lying areas, but in Houston, it was such a slow go for that water to make it down through the bayous and into the bay. Here, it's more down power lines and trees. You can see here's a resident just driving through right now. But it's very different. A lot of people went to shelters early here in Florida because, remember, here in Miami, they thought this was going to be the bullseye for days.
Right.
One woman just drove back in, and she's going to check on her house. She went to a shelter. She went on Friday. She's glad she did.
It's amazing that we're seeing that damage, even though that isn't where the bullseye was. Meg Oliver, thanks so much. Meg reporting from the scene in Florida.
When you look down at the Hyatt Regency, which I'm told by somebody who answered the phone is closed indefinitely, they may not be open until Friday, but you look through the St. Johns River is basically out of sight on the other side of that hotel. That is a riverfront hotel, but obviously the river is now on the wrong side of it. You can see, if you look to the right near the stop sign, some parking meters are almost completely submerged. And again, the water is still rising. The Jacksonville mayor said this morning that the water could still be rising 4 to 6 more feet. If that happened, it would be up to about here.
And that clearly broke atop a huge new building that's going up in downtown Miami. Take a look at these images coming in to CNN right now. You see, we always worried about these cranes, these huge cranes collapsing in the face of these enormous winds. We know that 2 cranes actually went down in Miami, a third one in Fort Lauderdale. Take a look at these images just coming in to CNN. Pretty powerful images indeed. Damage significant. This is in Miami. Joining us on the phone right now is the U.S. Coast Guard Vice Admiral Carl Schultz, the commander of the Atlantic area, is joining us from Miami, from the Coast Guard Air Station there. So, Admiral, tell us about the Coast Guard effort now in this recovery effort. What are you guys doing?
Well, good evening, Wolf. The Coast Guard is basically today we've been reconstituting our capabilities across the state of Florida as Irma's moved across state line into Georgia here. We brought our rotary wing and our fixed wing aircraft into the states. We are, postured for response operations, rescue type work. We haven't had a high number of those cases. As I'm sitting here, a call just came in for the ready helicopter crew to maybe go out and do a medical evacuation. We're also keenly focused on reopening Florida's seaports. The seaports, particularly Port Everglades, Tampa, are critical nodes for energy products coming in here to South Florida that contribute to the availability of gas and things like that. So we're getting ourselves, back saddled up here with our full range of capabilities to support the state of Florida and the Federal Emergency Management Agency here.
Are you involved in the search and rescue operations in the Keys? Because we understand that's where the damage could be really, really significant, and they're looking to see if there are individuals who may need to be rescued, right?
Well, earlier today, Wolf, I actually overflew the southwest Florida coast and the Florida Keys with Governor Scott, and we're still assessing the damages. The local first responders, the sheriffs, the fire department, the police are getting out and doing health and welfare checks on folks. We have not heard a lot of fidelity yet on what the situation is there. I know there's been cell phone outages, so there's not a lot of connectivity. We did see. The good news is the mainland is connected through the US 1 highway all the way to the Keys, so accessibility on the roads looks good. We saw many vessels that have been pushed up against shorelines, partially sunk. We saw some wind damage. Mobile homes, RV parks were fairly seriously hit. So again, I think there's still, today's the first day where folks are really getting in and understanding the situation and assessing the needs.
We're showing our viewers, Admiral, some live pictures coming in from the Keys. We see the extensive damage, and clearly the further south you go, the more extensive the damage. Look at this area over the Florida Keys. You can see the roofs of that building just simply gone, and that's just one little image. I know the Coast Guard's doing incredibly important work, and we're grateful to you and your fellow members of the Coast Guard. Vice Admiral Carl Schultz, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, you got it, Wolf. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll have much more on the dangerous tropical storm Irma now moving inland across the southeast, and the remaining threat posed by Hurricane Jose out in the Atlantic, plus the increasingly desperate conditions in areas the hurricane hit when it was a Category 5 monster.
Okay, yeah, he's up on his knees, sorry. But look, here's a surge coming into the rocks here. Now, typically, yesterday, you could see sand out there. Now, you can see water. This is where it typically would be. But we're just now starting to get the surge in here. So where it goes from here, I don't know. As I said, I don't think, Steve, it'll be as intense as if we had gotten a direct hit from this, since this is the backside.
Jeff, what about high tide? Is it already?
Yeah, that's this morning. That's the other factor. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the other factor. We're expecting high tide here between 6 and 9, depending on where exactly you are along the coast in the Tampa Bay area. And just so you know, for those who don't know what Madeira Beach is, this is a barrier island that is off St. Pete, which is, of course, east of Tampa. So Tampa is actually a little bit protected. It's these barrier islands that are going to take the bulk of the crap here.
How did you get there? Is there a bridge?
Yeah, well, there are bridges, and well, you probably can't see it because it's behind me, but there's a bridge that goes from Madeira Beach across to Treasure Island, for those who may know the geography down here. And there are bridges to all of this, and those bridges, even though they've cut them off to regular folks, fools like us, they'll let us in. So, yeah, the bridges are open.
The bridges are open, and so is Jeff Flock describing what's going on down there in Madeira Beach in the Tampa St. Pete area.
Right. Jeff, it's okay to put your hood on now. Thank you very much.
First, though, out of Northwest Miami, Jay, check this out. You have what appears to be a roof coming right off there with all the conditions there. The fire department confirming that, yes, this is a roof peeling off a two-story apartment building. This is at 2642 Northwest 5th Avenue. We don't know if anybody was inside the home at the time, but you can see right through where that roof was. The wind's so strong there, it wasn't safe for fire rescue teams to be out to respond to that call. Just impressive to see this on camera.
Just a moment. In Jacksonville,
downtown Jacksonville that we see as of right now. Now, one of the things we do know is because of the storm surge, it is truly at a record high, and it's something that has beat Hurricane Dora, which was in 1964. It's kind of baffling to think about that literally part of the rainwater from the St. Johns River is now flooding downtown Jacksonville. And just to let you know, I know you're not here, so it's hard to kind of smell, but my photographer, Steve, and I recognize that we think there must be an issue because we can definitely smell sewage at this point, so we're probably going to leave this area really soon because we don't know what's in this water, but there's debris and all sorts of different items that we've seen just walking over here to bring you this live coverage. We've seen branches, everything from signs, and it also smells like there's also waste in this area. Reporting in downtown Jacksonville, Caitlin Chana, CBS 47, Fox 30.
All right, great.
Boulevard. Tell us about where you are and what's happening there.
We're in Tampa. We're on Bayshore Boulevard and Delaware Avenue. And take a look back here at the bay because it's getting pretty rough out here. And I'll tell you guys, just from eyeballing it, we've seen the water rise about 1.5 feet in the last few hours. We did go through high tide earlier this morning. And, of course, you know, all we've been talking about is the storm surge. And you heard Janice mention the storm surge over and over again this morning as well. So if this area is going to flood, it's going to be because of this right here. So we're keeping an eye on it. But I want to actually show you guys video that we shot yesterday. If we can take a look at that. It's from the bay. And I posted it on Twitter. It went crazy viral because people could not believe what they were looking at. The bay was dry. I mean, and not just a small portion of it, a lot of it. And I called Janice yesterday and I said, please explain to me what is going on, because people were walking around saying, I've never seen anything like this here before. And Janice said because of the way, the direction of the winds from Irma, it was pushing everything out of the bay. And that water obviously now back in here. So the concern at this point is going to be flooding. We've seen a little bit of localized flooding this morning, just on street corners, things like that. Nothing too major, but we're going to keep an eye on this because as people wake up this morning, they could still be seeing some flooding. Even though it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't mean it's not going to.
Flooding and dangerous winds across the southeastern United States. There's also growing alarm about the conditions on the Caribbean islands. Irma devastated when it was a Category 5 monster. U.S. Navy ships are on station in the Atlantic to deliver food and water to people who have been cut off now for days. Joining us on the phone is Rear Admiral Jeffrey Hughes. He's the commander of the USS Kearsarge. Commander, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us how the Kearsarge, your men and women of your crew, are helping relief efforts.
Well, good afternoon, Wolf, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk with you. And we're currently underway on board ship about 5 miles south of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. First of all, our thoughts and prayers go out to those affected by the devastation caused by Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey, for that matter. This is a whole-of-government response effort, and we're here at the request of the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands, supporting the lead federal agency, FEMA, to assist in the response, relief, and recovery efforts. In fact, I had a chance to meet with the governor to better understand his priorities so that we could best match our capabilities to their needs. And what we have with us is we're on 3 large deck amphibious ships right now, the Kearsarge, the USS Wasp, and the USS Oak Hill, with 20 Navy and Marine Corps tilt-rotor aircraft and helicopters and 3 shallow draft landing craft, tons of equipment and supplies, but really most important, we've got 3,400 sailors and Marines from these ships and the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit and other commands. But all the services are down here, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, National Guard. We always come together in a crisis.
Are you still, Commander, searching for missing people?
So currently, we have not had as much search and rescue activity as you might have seen in, say, Hurricane Harvey, because the flooding damage was not as prominent. But I'd say we've done over 100 medical evacuation missions to include dozens of critical care patients. And I'd say that the lion's share of the work that we've done for the last...
I think we may have lost our connection with Rear Admiral Jeffrey Hughes, the commander of the USS Kearsarge, but we want to thank him, thank all the men and women of the U.S. Navy who are on the scene right now. Thank you so much. We'll try to reconnect with the Admiral. In the meantime, let's get an update on the storm from our meteorologist, Tom Sater. What's the latest, Tom?
Well, right now, Tropical Storm Irma, the center is about 150 miles due south of Atlanta, where now we're reporting in Georgia already 2 fatalities, one in a suburb of Atlanta from a fallen tree. It's nice to see the dry air infiltrate the system. And in the next hour, Wolf, we'll go through the number of records that Irma has just smashed and rewriting the record books. But a few more records did occur today. Watches are still in effect where the water is high. Until it recedes, we'll lose these watches and warnings. In red, up in Jacksonville, mentioned this 2 days ago when it was 500 miles away from Naples, that Jacksonville, with such a large extent of these bands, was going to see that wind coming in from the ocean. In Jacksonville, on the St. Johns River, reaching over 5.5 feet. It's breaking the record by 1/2 foot from Matthew last year. In Savannah, the Savannah River, getting up to over 12 feet, missing the record from Matthew by just 0.2 of an inch. And into Charleston on the harbor, water over the battery, getting up over 9.92 feet. That places third behind Hugo and then, of course, Matthew. The extent of the wind and rain field expressing itself outward, it is interesting to note, still a tornado watch in effect for parts of Georgia and the Carolinas. Another record in a 24-hour period, the number of tornado warnings in Florida, the record was 47. They issued 69. And for the first time ever in history, a tropical storm warning. Far north Georgia, encompassing much of eastern Alabama, suburbs of Atlanta, all the way into South Carolina. So again, coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk more about that, Wolf. Sustained winds are at 50. By tomorrow morning, we're down to 40, continuing to lose its strength. Thank goodness there will never be another Harvey or another Irma. Those names will be retired. Thank goodness.
Yep, well, good point. All right, Tom, we'll check back with you in the next hour. Coming up, more on the breaking news. After hammering Florida from one end to the other, Irma moves north as a tropical storm, bringing high winds and high water to Georgia and the Carolinas, left behind a path of destruction as communities begin to assess the damage.
I'm Essie Cup. You might know me from here. Trump has a history.
Kind of like dodging a lot of trees and debris, and that's why you have to be very careful. But we drove from Doral, and we first drove to North Miami Beach. 826, I-95, completely isolated, which is great because obviously it was still under the curfew. Then we went to Aventura. We went to Aventura Mall. They were clearing the storm drains there. Still a lot of downed trees. As far as businesses, we haven't seen any businesses open. We drove by the Publix in Miami Shores. That is still closed. And we also went by a trailer park. We sent that video earlier. I don't know if you were able to turn it around to show it to our viewers. But, yeah, I mean, just a lot of water everywhere. And here there is still some water.
Yeah,
I want to say maybe like 1 to 2 feet of water in this area.
Yeah, you could tell by looking at the tires on that car how high up it comes. And we've seen some cars as you drive around also out there. Have you seen any people, just out of curiosity, walking around? I imagine that this was part of the area that was evacuated for the storm.
Well, you see there's a resident right there. I don't know if she stayed or if she's just getting home. It seems she's assessing the damage, but you can tell that the water, look at the water lines on the garage. I don't know if you can see from here where it went up. I would say maybe like 2 feet of water. Hi, good morning. We're with Channel 4. Everything is okay? Everything is okay? She says everything is okay in her home.
That's certainly good news there. Maribel, I just want to let you know we did get some word from North Bay Village Emergency Manager Evelyn Urbello. She said that North Bay Island's pretty much all flooded. No streets are passable. That's how it was described. I see that you're driving around in that area right now. Harbor Island East Drive is passable. West Drive is not. Also saying that Treasure Island South and Treasure Drive completely flooded. Adventure and Hispaniola Avenue.
Right now.
Yeah, and that's flooded as well. And East Treasure Drive partially flooded. Now, North Bay Village wants to know and let all the general employees know, with the exception of those who have been notified. They don't want them to report to work today because of the conditions you are seeing. So we just want to let the people of North Bay Village, anyone who works there in that community for the city, or to not show up to work unless you're one of those essential employees that was already told that you need to show up.
And that's typically how it happens. The essential employees are the ones that are given that call to show up, and the rest are being asked not to go to work.
I think that's a great idea. Because by the conditions here, we're seeing a resident here. Let me try to stop and see how she's doing. Hi, good morning. We're with Channel 4. How's everything? Are you just coming home now? Everything's okay? Everything. We're with Channel 4, yeah. She says she lives down the street and everything is okay. She's assessing the damage here. See, the water here has receded at this point, but I think it's a great judgment on behalf of North Bay Village to tell the residents and the employees to stay home. Hi, you see they're starting to clean up already, and they're coming out now. Some folks who are just coming back home. There you see it. And again, we're just seeing this for the very first time.
Yeah, you know, one of
the trying to bring it to our viewers.
One of the tips that I've seen from our reporting partners at the Herald when it comes to people trying to do a little bit of cleanup at their homes is you want to pick up just the small debris to, in case there's any winds or anything later on in the week, to keep that from flying and causing more damage. And also, as I'm seeing all that flooding there, if any of that flooding gets into the homes, another good piece of advice here is if you have any, and you see some people that are doing that small debris.
All right, you've been listening to coverage from our Miami station WFOR as they continue to assess the damage. Daylight breaking there. We're seeing some of the first images. Let's bring in Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. She's there in Miami. She waited out the storm in her district and is on the move now. Congresswoman, what are you seeing around you?
Well, just stay in your home. And we have a curfew for Miami-Dade from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The city of Miami has a curfew, too, and the city of Miami Beach. There's just no reason for anybody to be wandering around, and there are no gas stations that are operating as of yet. Well,
Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen, we thank you so much for spending some time with us to talk about this. It's just incredible when you see some of the pictures that are coming into us. But at the end of the day, I think what we can say and what you've highlighted for us, Congresswoman, is the fact that although this was a major hurricane, it appears at least now that we haven't had the significant loss of life that we saw in hurricanes previous. And although the damage is extensive, and that is a great question, Congresswoman, about Florida Power and Light to figure out exactly what's going on. 60% of the state without power. We knew this hurricane was coming for about a week, so that'll be an interesting question to dig into. But
Congresswoman, you're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The breaking news this hour, millions more Americans are now under assault by Irma as the dangerous storm that hammered much of Florida plows north. Charleston, South Carolina is in the midst of a life-threatening flash flood emergency. Cities as far inland as Atlanta at risk from this menacing tropical storm. Irma's final target in Florida, Jacksonville, now swamped by floodwaters rising to record high levels. A storm surge warning in effect this hour. The flooding danger intensifying in a city that didn't expect to suffer so badly from Irma's rampage. On the other end of the state, officials are now warning about a potential humanitarian crisis in the Florida Keys. A large section of the island chain has no power, no water, no cell service. The U.S. military says 10,000 people who refuse to leave the Keys before the storm may need to be evacuated. The Keys battered by the full force of Irma when it made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane on Sunday. The electricity is out across much of Florida tonight. More than 6 million people, about two-thirds of the customers, they are in the dark after Irma zigzagged between the state's east and west coast. The storm unleashing winds well over 100 miles an hour and impacting major cities from Miami to Tampa to Jacksonville. Officials warn some places won't have power for weeks. We're covering the breaking story with our correspondents and guests. They're standing by in the areas hardest hit by Irma. First, let's go to Marco Island, where Irma made its second landfall in Florida. CNN's Brian Todd is on the scene for us. Brian, you've been covering the storm through the worst of it. What are the conditions like where you are right now?
Wolf, Irma hit this spot like a buzzsaw, and as you can look around here, you can see the effect that it had. Roofs like this one, partial roofs, entire roofs, ripped off homes. You've got debris all over the place, wires down. hazardous material all over the streets. Now, this is in the southwestern corner of Florida. The damage lasts from this tip of Florida all the way to the northeastern part of Florida, Jacksonville, the largest city geographically in Florida, the largest city geographically in the United States. So you've got cities from here all the way up there just now starting to get their arms around what happened here.
Florida now fighting to recover after getting pounded for hours by winds, sometimes over 100 miles an hour. Every major city in Florida impacted by Irma's wrath, and over 6 million customers left without power, 2/3 of the state. The Florida Keys hit first in the U.S. with Category 4 winds, now with serious flooding and building damage, cut off from power and cut off from the mainland. The southwest coast of Florida hit with winds of 120 miles an hour, scoured into the night with driving rain and whipping winds, with the skies lit by the occasional transformer explosion. Naples among the hardest hit, now flooded one block after another, and buildings flattened or damaged by the wind. This is nearby Marco Island, before and after, and in Bonita Springs, neighborhoods inundated with water.
There's mobiles turned over, there's mobiles upside down, and there's a lot of water.
While the storm tracked up the west side of Florida, the east coast was still hit by flooding and high winds. Miami had heavy flooding on the downtown waterfront. Construction cranes knocked over and roofs ripped off by the whipping winds. One sailboat ended up on a football field. There were even scattered reports of looting. Up the east coast, coastal flooding from Broward County up beyond Daytona, leaving neighborhoods and businesses underwater, and houses with their rooftops torn off. As far north as Jacksonville, record storm surges causing flooding on the St. Johns River, and at least one home sliding into the ocean. Even inland areas like Orlando were not spared, with downed trees, downed power lines, and flooding.
We've had over 200 rescues of people that we brought out. And in some places, when you go back there, the water was chest deep.
Rescues from flooded neighborhoods continued throughout the night, with a total of 6.5 million people in Florida told to evacuate. The question now, when can they return home?
You check with local officials before return home to make sure you can safely do so.
Cleanup crews now working on downed trees and branches and clearing sand off roadways. But authorities say parts of Florida could be without power for weeks, while spots as far north as Charleston, South Carolina, are still experiencing flooding from the storm.
And by the time Irma finished with this place, Marco Island, she left at least 15 homes that had their roofs either ripped off or had other severe damage. That's according to the fire department. But people here, Wolf, tonight are counting themselves as fortunate because hundreds of people live in this area of Marco Island year-round. Only about 40 of them decided to stay, and there are no serious injuries reported. This is the spot where Irma made its second landfall, Wolf. They're counting themselves as fortunate here tonight.
We're showing our viewers, Brian, some live pictures of trucks going in to restore power in these areas. Brian Todd on the scene for us. Thanks very, very much. Now to the flooding emergency in Jacksonville, Florida, that's unfolding right now. Irma kicking the city very, very hard in the past few hours alone. CNN's Kaylee Hartung is on the scene for us. Kaylee, floodwaters, they are rising to historic levels there, right?
They are, Wolf, and the waters of the St. Johns River continue to roll through downtown Jacksonville. We're about a block from the banks of the river there. You can see the waves crashing against the seawall. At the river's height today, levels were 5.5 feet above what you would normally see here at high tide. But at that high tide at 2 o'clock, we first began to see these waters recede. If my cameraman Dave Russ can swing over to my left here, this street has dried out. Water earlier today, about 2 blocks up that street, but if we rotate to the other side of the street, floodwaters continue. Talking to the mayor earlier, he said, don't be fooled when you see pockets like that dry out. This water is not going anywhere anytime soon. And the challenge a lot of people in downtown Jacksonville are facing now, Wolf, they came here for shelter. They came here to be safe from these waters and the effects of the storm because their homes were in places that they felt were in more danger. But now, these floodwaters in Jacksonville, a serious concern for so many here as this situation continues to evolve.
Yeah, we'll stay in close touch with you, Kaylee. Thank you very much. We're getting new video of damage in Miami right now where construction cranes were whipped by the hurricane's winds. CNN's John Berman is in Miami for us. John, we spoke about the danger at all of these cranes on Friday before Irma hit. And now we know what, at least 2 in Miami and 1 in Fort Lauderdale were in fact whipped and damaged.
Yeah, 3 cranes down in southeast Florida, Wolf, exactly what some people had feared, really showing that the damage done to this part of the state was twofold. Number one, the storm surge. You can see the effects right around me right now. These boats pushed up on shore in this marina in Coconut Grove, a 5-foot storm surge in downtown Miami. You can see the impact here. And then the winds. The winds were 100 miles an hour on the tops of the sky rises in the city, Wolf. And we had been told that these cranes, and there are more than 20 of them in downtown Miami, we were told that these cranes could withstand gusts of 145 miles an hour. Now, clearly, we don't believe the wind reached that level, yet the cranes, at least 2 of them, did not stand. At least 1 appeared to have some kind of issue with a crack in the pulley with the counterbalance, and that may have caused it to partially collapse or crack, depending on who you ask. They don't want to use the term collapse because they didn't fall completely off the building. And the officials here make clear that no one was hurt from these cranes, and there was not much other damage to the surrounding buildings. Nevertheless, you can see the clear concern with having these types of cranes in an atmosphere like this. There just wasn't enough time, Wolf, to take them down. It takes 6 days to 2 weeks to move one of these cranes start to finish, and they didn't get that kind of warning. Wolf?
Very dangerous situation. It could have been a whole lot worse. All right, John Berman, thank you. Tonight, officials are also warning that new evacuations may be needed in the Florida Keys, one of the hardest hit areas in the state, if not the hardest. CNN's Bill Weir is joining us right now from Key Largo. Bill, a large section of the Keys right now has no power, no running water, and not much of anything.
Not much of anything, Wolf, and we're about 60 miles north of where the eye wall came ashore, but it all depends on the structure of your home in terms of what is left of your life. We're in this trailer park here, about mile marker 85 or so, and it is one heartbreak after another. A child's picture book on the ground, the markings of the search and rescue teams who put the date and the time they searched that home. Fortunately, 0 bodies found inside, also 0 people found alive. But most of these folks, we hope, would evacuate living in structures like this. And good thing, you can see Irma's storm surge, what it does to a mobile home. This was someone's living room. And of course, this is stuff. It can be replaced. They will measure this storm in billions of dollars in terms of the total cost. But some things you cannot put a price on. The memories of the picture box we found before. And right now, there is so much concern about those people who are completely out of touch. And there are Facebook missing persons lists out there. People have been pinging me all day on Instagram and Twitter asking if we could go check on their parents. I wish I could. I wish I could get further down this road. But it's impassable in many places. The Florida Department of Transportation has apparently by about 4 o'clock today inspected 22 of the 43 bridges that connect this necklace of islands going all the way down to Key West. A couple of them are problem areas as well. But the main problem is the cell phones that we're so accustomed to, the towers, there's no power for them the further south you get. So we have to use a satellite phone even up here close to Key Largo where the best cell service still remains. So people don't know if their loved ones are just incommunicado or in more dire circumstances. And even if they are alive, as you can see, looking at my sweaty bum here, we got no air conditioning. And, you know, there's medications to worry about, those sorts of things. I just saw a convoy of about 15 big tractor trailers, hopefully full of supplies, you know, steaming south down toward Keys West. In addition to that, the Navy is chipping in an entire aircraft carrier. So it's all hands on deck to try to get in there and really assess the human toll of Irma. Wolf?
Yeah, the USS Lincoln on the way. All right, Bill Weir, thanks so much. Let's talk more about this devastation in the Florida Keys, and it is enormous. We're joined on the phone by Monroe County Commissioner David Rice. Commissioner, thanks for joining us. So based on everything you've seen and heard, what's the level of devastation in your county?
Well, Wolf, one of the great problems that we have, as you just heard, is communication. So while I'm 100 miles from Key West in a 120-mile long county, the most extreme portion of the county, including Marathon and Key West, we have extremely limited ability to communicate. Certainly, we've taken a major hit. We have extensive property damage. We do not have statistics at the moment on any injuries, loss to life. We will be finding those things out later.
How many people are without power in your county?
At the moment, I would be hard-pressed to say because I don't believe anybody could really say how many are here at the moment. Many people left, others did not. But if you're here, you're probably without power unless you have a generator or you're extremely fortunate.
Those who stayed behind in the Keys, are they still in shelters?
Some are in shelters, others are not. The Keys have no shelters that are approved. The last moment is a refuge of last resort at some Category 5 constructed schools, and I understand many people rode the storm out at that point. But as I say, we have very little firsthand information at this time.
If people who have houses there or who live there are up north, for example, northern part of Florida, riding out this storm, or they live in other parts of the country, what's your best guess right now? How long before those folks can return to their homes in the Keys?
Well, if I would rather not make a guess because that's an open issue. I think within the next day or two, we hope to be able to have safe transit down the Keys. DOT has inspected most, if not all, the bridges at this point. The power companies are securing any live lines. The hospitals are not yet reopened. We hope that they will be and expect they will be, at least 2 out of the 3, perhaps tomorrow morning. At that point, it's certainly more safe for people to come back into the Keys, but we really have no water to speak of. Electricity is very sporadic to non-existent. It's not a place someone wants to be right at this moment.
Give us some perspective. How much damage has been caused to your county, Monroe County, in the Keys right now? Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Well, yes. I have seen Hurricane Audrey in Louisiana as a child. I've seen Hurricane Camille that cleared out miles of homes and businesses. We do not appear to be that impacted at this time.
Is your county getting the state and federal help it needs?
They are absolutely. Our partners with both the state and federal government have been in communication with us. I believe we will see the first C-130 of supplies in within the next couple of hours at the Naval Air Station in Key West. The state and federal government are really stepping up to the plate. Now, it is complicated by the fact that many of the rescue efforts and supply efforts will be by air, and up until almost this very time, they would have to fly through a hurricane to get here because the hurricane moved on up the state. So, yes, we're very happy with the response. The Navy, as you heard, is sending a carrier that has tremendous capability. It will probably be standing off Key West.
David Rice is the mayor of Monroe County, the commissioner, I should say. Commissioner, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thanks for your help.
We appreciate everything you're doing. Good luck to all the folks there. I know this is a crisis that has unfolded. Just ahead, the newest forecast for Irma as it endangers cities in the south. Also, tonight, another hurricane that's threatening the U.S. in the days ahead. We'll talk to a National Guardsman who's been involved in urgent rescues on an island in crisis after being hammered by Irma.
let those residents in later this afternoon.
Now, Meg, I know that you also covered Hurricane Harvey, which of course hit the Houston area just a few weeks ago. Can you compare the damage you're seeing today, the day after Irma made landfall in Florida, and what you saw in Houston, and some of the differences and similarities?
Stephanie, it's very different where we have been traveling today, because in Houston, it was a huge flood event. Here, the water seems to have receded quite a bit already, both cities, low-lying areas. But in Houston, it was such a slow go for that water to make it down through the bayous and into the bay. Here, it's more down power lines and trees. You can see here's a resident just driving through right now. But it's very different. A lot of people went to shelters early here in Florida because, remember, here in Miami, they thought this was going to be the bullseye for days. Right. One woman just drove back in, and she's going to check on her house. She went to a shelter. She went on Friday. She's glad she did.
It's amazing that we're seeing that damage, even though that isn't where the bullseye was. Meg Oliver, thanks so much. Meg reporting from the scene in Florida.
When you look down at the Hyatt Regency, which I'm told by somebody who answered the phone is closed indefinitely, they may not be open until Friday, but you look through the St. Johns River is basically out of sight on the other side of that hotel. That is a riverfront hotel, but obviously the river is now on the wrong side of it. You can see, if you look to the right near the stop sign, some parking meters are almost completely submerged. And again, the water is still rising. The Jacksonville mayor said this morning that the water could still be rising 4 to 6 more feet. If that happened, it would be up to about here. And they're saying around 2 o'clock is going to be the highest water level around here. They wanted everybody out before, but you heard him telling people if you didn't get out in time to hang a white sheet, and they'll try to get you. A lot of people have already been calling for help. The last update, 600 calls so far. They don't have much of a breakdown in terms of how many of them were calling for rescues, but about 60 calls an hour since the water started rising. And again, it's still coming up, Shep.
Peter Ducey in Jacksonville, back to him. 6 feet. I see the wind still howling there, Peter.
The wind is howling. And Shep, the mayor, when he described this, he said this is a Category 3 surge. The storm didn't hit as a Category 3 here. But you look, the water, Shep, it looks like you're standing on the banks of a bay or of a river or of the ocean. It is coming in with so much force. And again, the level is still rising. We've been here about 90 minutes so far, and the water has moved a couple of feet. We haven't really seen a dramatic rise in terms of how deep it is here. But again, this is just one spot. There's a lot of places for the water to go. That is not the case. That is not what they're expecting in every residential area. There are a lot of residential neighborhoods that they want people out of. Businesses don't seem to be that much of a problem because we have been driving all around and it doesn't really seem like there is anybody that's open. And the only people that are really out are a handful of police officers and some curious folks who came out as soon as the rain stopped. But we don't really see anything open, so business is not the big concern in terms of getting people out to safety so that they don't need to be rescued. That is residents. And while the safety of business owners or customers may not be much of a concern right now, and you can see the wind really just whipping this water up, and as we know, it's not just water. There's a lot of stuff on the street that's now in this too. But there's going to be some serious damage because I was peeking a little bit earlier. The water isn't into these places just yet. But you would have to think that it's only a matter of time until it starts seeping in because, again, no real protective measures taken because Jacksonville was not ever mentioned as one of the places that was going to get a lot of damage. And this is actually the first emergency responder that we have seen come through here. I have no idea where he may be going. It doesn't look like there's a ton of urgency right now. As a truck leaves, this pickup truck, we saw these gentlemen pulling a stranded car out just a few minutes ago, somebody who went in where the water was too high. It looks like the water may be too high for the Jacksonville Fire Department as well right now.
Peter Ducey in Jacksonville, where they just recorded,
got the lights back off.
They just recorded a 52-mile-an-hour wind gust there at Jacksonville Beach. Let's get to the mayor of Jacksonville Beach, Charlie Latham, who's lived there for 50 years and says he's never seen anything like this. Mr. Mayor, how are things this afternoon?
Well, we're hanging in there, Shep. We're not as bad as South Florida, but we've certainly got our work cut out for us.
What is the immediate concern?
Well, right now we have as Mayor Curry said in Jacksonville, we've got a historical flood in the area. In all my years of Jacksonville Beach living, I've never seen anything like this before. We had 27 inches of rain in 24 hours, and so
27 inches of rain. That was not the prediction for anyone.
No, sir, it wasn't. And that, if you look at any reservoir, if you look at any lake or retention pond, they just all have flooded into the streets. So we've got massive flooding in our residential and business communities.
Are people ready for this?
Well, we were as ready as we could be, and I'm proud to say that we
this
were
is
able to keep...
before the storm and after. We're joined now by a member of the Kentucky Air National Guard who was involved in rescue operations on the Dutch Caribbean island of St. Martin. Chief Master Sergeant Aaron May is joining us. Chief May, thanks very much for joining us. So what are the conditions like on the ground, first of all, in St. Martin?
Well, first of all, it's my teams, my special tactics teams that are down there right now. I'm back here in Louisville, Kentucky, help coordinate the efforts that are going on down there. From the reports I received from my team, they went directly into the airport Sunday, and there was basically American citizens dispersed throughout the airport and surrounding areas throughout the island. So our job was to go down there as a special tactics team and start coordinating the relief efforts to get those people out of St. Martin and back to Puerto Rico.
What's the status of the search and rescue operations?
As far as the search and rescue operations, our personnel were mainly on the airfield coordinating the relief efforts to get the personnel, roughly 1,000 American citizens that were stranded on the island after the actual hurricane passed through. So our personnel went there, established the airport, and worked with the Dutch military and started bringing in airlift to get the personnel out of there. And like I said, they evacuated roughly 1,000 people out of that airport into Puerto Rico.
Any Americans still left as far as you know?
As far as I know, Wolf, I do not believe. There may be a few still behind, but as far as our efforts, it was 1,000 people that they were able to get from St. Martin into Puerto Rico, utilizing airlift from our unit here at Louisville, Kentucky, and also Puerto Rico and New York Air National Guard units.
Do the people who are still there have enough food and supplies?
Wolf, I don't have a solid answer on that. But I do believe they have the situation, from what I understand, under control. But again, I don't have the exact answer to that question.
Because we are told that on St. Martin, food is in very, very short supply right now. We've also heard reports of looting that's been going on. I assume you've heard of those reports as well.
Well, I'd be speculating if I was actually to answer that question. All I know is from what we were going down there to do is to evacuate the American citizens that were there. But from what I understand, the Dutch military, they had things under control from their perspective.
Let's hope they do. Chief Master Sergeant Aaron May, thanks to all that you are doing, the men and women who are involved in this operation. They are saving lives. Appreciate it very, very much. Let's go to one of the hardest hit areas in Florida right now. CNN's Ed Lavandera is on Marco Island, where Irma made a second landfall. Ed, you've been on the move, so what kind of damage are you seeing?
Hi, Wolf. Well, here in Goodland, Florida, there are about 40 people who rode out the storm here, amazingly enough. And it is a community that sits on the edge of the Everglades and the Gulf of Mexico. This is a community that took a direct impact from this storm. You know, many people would probably suggest that no one should have been here. Behind me is a home where Gary Stringer waited out the storm by himself. He thought this was all going to come crashing down on him. He described how the roof was crackling, the tree next to him was rumbling, and then all of a sudden he heard the crack, and this is what happened, Wolf. This tree collapsed, thankfully not toward him where he was, but unfortunately for this family, the tree came crashing down on their house. And the stories of survival here is just absolutely stunning as the handful of people we've talked to described what it was like to wait out the storm here in Goodland, Florida. This is a small fishing village, couple hundred residents call this home. This is by far the area where we've seen the most intense damage. This is an area where essentially the second landfall of Hurricane Irma was in here along Marco Island. We're on the eastern edge of Marco Island. The winds were 130 miles an hour. At some point, the gust even reached up to 150 140 miles per hour. Residents described the storm surge taking over most of this town, 7 feet of water in some places. Most of the people that we've talked to who were in their homes really thought that at some point their houses were going to start splintering apart in those winds. Wolf?
What a sad story indeed. Art Ed Lavendera on the scene for us. Thank you. Also tonight, Irma's creating new danger and damage as it moves north into Georgia, the Carolinas, and beyond. This as another hurricane actually looms, potentially threatening the United States. Let's check in with our meteorologist, Tom Sater. Tom, what's the status of Irma right now?
Irma's tropical storm, the center is 150 miles south of Atlanta, moving north-northwest at a good clip at 17 miles per hour, and maximum winds 50 miles per hour by tomorrow morning, 40. However, it's already responsible for at least 2 fatalities in Georgia, one in an Atlanta suburb with a fallen tree. It's nice to see the drier air move in, but we've had historic flooding in Jacksonville, as I mentioned a couple days ago, in the St. John River. We're going to have to watch that. More on this in a moment, but it's been shattering the records, Wolf. Let's begin from the very beginning. We watched this as a typical wave coming off the coast of Africa, but in early infancy, we noticed that rapid strength, rapid development. In 24-hour period, it went from a tropical storm, jumped over Category 1 status, went to Category 2, 3, 4, 5, into the northern islands of the Lesser Antilles at a Category 5, the strongest in history to affect this area, decimating Barbuda, Antigua, Anguilla, St. Martin. Dutch and French authorities are there providing aid, also evacuations. A number of citizens from Dutch are heading back to the Netherlands. The United Kingdom has got another naval vessel on its way to the British Virgin Islands. The U.S. has been there. They're taking residents even from St. Martin over to San Juan. As it continued, the biggest sigh of relief most likely was in Puerto Rico and San Juan. The eye staying off the land, lashing the island with heavy rain and wind, but no direct hit. But then it made its way to the Turks and Caicos, Cockburn Harbor getting hit hard, a number of the islands at a Category 5, the strongest in history to ever affect the Turks and Caicos. On its way to Cuba for 37 hours, sustaining winds at 185 miles per hour. There has never been a cyclone in the world, a typhoon in the world, or any other hurricane that has sustained that kind of strength for that long a period of time. Making its way to northern coast of Cuba as a Category 5, making landfall the strongest since 1924, lashing with heavy rains on its western flank, the city streets of Havana. Most likely the interaction kept us in the U.S. from getting a Category 5 landfall, but we had our Category 4. In the Keys, just 16 days after Harvey made landfall in Rockport, Texas. For the first time in history, the U.S. has 2 Category 4 landfalls in the same year. After the Keys, landfall, Marco Island, at the exact same latitude and longitude as Wilma, also a Category 3. Ironic. But then the winds, the surge, the winds coming in off the coast, that's where Jacksonville was hit very early on and had to sustain that for some time. We know the damage, the record storm surge, the 6.5 million without power. As we continue northward, more records with the flooding. As you get to the north, we're watching now Jacksonville today hitting 5.5 feet in the St. Johns River. That smashes the record from last year with Matthew by 1/2 foot. You get up towards Savannah and the Savannah River. They reached over 12 feet, just missing the all-time record by just 0.2 foot. But then it was into Charleston, and again, in the harbor, water over the battery, 9.92 feet, coming in just 3rd place behind Hugo and Matthew. But then the warnings started to come out, not just the flash flood warnings, but the tornado warnings. We had 69 tornado warnings in a 24-hour period, Wolf. The record was 47, and for the first time in history, a tropical storm warning for North Georgia, including the Atlanta area. It's enough of it's enough. We're putting them in the record books. We'll never have another Harvey or Irma. The last time we had back-to-back retirement names was Rita and Stan 12 years ago.
Very quickly, Tom, what about Jose?
Jose came very close to the northern islands. In fact, after they were hit the first time, 24 hours later, they had another hurricane watch, missing the islands, direct hit, sliding into the northern Atlantic. Great question, Wolf. Do not worry at all about Jose. It'll go in the books, too, being quickly back behind this one, but no threat to the U.S. mainland.
All right, good news on Jose. All right, thanks very much. Tom Sater, we'll get back to you. Just ahead, new information on the destruction in Florida that's still unfolding right now. Our correspondents are all across the areas that took a real beating from Irma. We'll get a live update right after a quick break.
help someone right now, so we're going to do our best to stay out of the way. Do you guys need this rope?
I don't think so.
All right, guys, stay with us.
Okay, that is coverage from our Jacksonville affiliate WJAX, and live coverage at that. We want to stay in Jacksonville now and go to Tessa Duvall, a reporter at the Florida Times-Union, also joining us from Jacksonville. Tessa, tell us what you're seeing around you, and we have video now that you sent us that shows what looks like storm surge as well as waves crashing into the coast here in Jacksonville.
Yeah, hi, I'm here on the Jacksonville River Walk on the north bank. I am near where there are a lot of banks and other institutions that have their offices, and this is normally a quiet river walk where you see people running and jogging and enjoying being outside, and today it looks a lot more like the Atlantic Ocean than a river itself.
Okay, and just to be clear to our viewers, this is actually what Tessa is seeing right now, what you're seeing on camera, these waves crashing up, what Tessa has just described as a river walk. Tessa, what are authorities telling you about the dangers that are happening right now? Is what we're seeing rainfall and the effects of that, or are we seeing what we had been warned about for a week, which is storm surge?
Yeah, so we are coming up on high tide right now, so that's a big part of what we're seeing. We also had a nor'easter that blew through Jacksonville prior to us even seeing Hurricane Irma or any of her bands yesterday. So we got rain and wind and trees before we ever saw the hurricane itself. So it's a combination of all of these things that is really contributing to the flooding that you're seeing. And as you can see, we've got a lot of folks outside who are really curious about this. Like I said, this is normally really nice and pretty, good place to take in the river, to enjoy it from a lot further distance than we're seeing it at right now.
Yeah, I can hear a lot of wind around you, and as we look at our live satellite picture, Jacksonville still is within Irma's path here on the eastern coast of the Florida Peninsula. Is it still raining heavily, and how intense is the wind that you're feeling there?
It is still raining in parts of our area. We got some sprinkles on the way over here. The heavy rain has seemed to hold off for the last few hours, at least in the part of town that I've been in. So right now, the wind is still continuing to be a bigger factor for us here.
Okay, and you said high tide is coming up right now. How are you hearing about rescues in that area occurring? We were seeing a live rescue from our affiliate WJAX. Is that happening near where you are?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of rescues happening, not on this area particularly, because as you can see, this is a lot of just office buildings around us. Most people were told not to report to work today, so we're not having people rescued from these buildings, but certainly from our neighborhoods and a lot of flood-prone areas. There have been hundreds, I believe about 600 calls to the fire department today, just trying to get people to safety.
How unusual is this for this part of Florida to be experiencing this kind of flooding?
Yeah, this is unlike anything that people have seen for a long time. One of my editors talked to a neighbor who'd lived in his historic neighborhood home for 30 years and hadn't seen any flooding. I mean, the street, you could kayak down it, and hadn't seen anything like that the entire time that he lived in this historic neighborhood, which is basically right on the river. So this is, we are used to some flooding. You take that when you are near the beach, when you are near the river, but this is just judging by the number of people who are out just gawking at this. A lot of us have never seen anything like this before.
And are officials telling people to stay inside still there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I mean, Tessa, I know that you're a journalist, so you're outside, you're reporting on this very important story that's affecting your communities down there in Florida. But are other people supposed to be out there, or are they being told to stay inside and hunker down the way they were earlier today?
Tell us what you've seen over the last
a lot of people are still being encouraged to stay inside when you have flooded roads. You don't want people getting swept away. But of course, this is something that's really abnormal. So
the disaster spawned by Hurricane Irma is still unfolding as the storm moves north with potentially deadly winds and flooding. And tonight, the full scope of the damage in Florida is being revealed. CNN's Brian Todd is in the hard-hit state. He's in the southwest coast. Brian, you've seen some extreme damage.
We certainly have, Wolf. Just a short time ago, we came out of a badly flooded neighborhood not far from here in Bonita Springs, Florida. We went there just to survey the damage, but we ended up getting involved in the search for an elderly couple stranded in their home. Much of Bonita Springs, Florida is underwater. This small, stoic community, sandwiched between Fort Myers and Naples, was slammed with Irma's highest winds and unrelenting rain. When the Imperial River flooded, so did this mobile home neighborhood, the Imperial Bonita Estates. When we come upon Doreen Regal, caretaker of the mobile homes, she's visibly worried about an elderly couple who decided to stay in their home.
They may be drowned. I don't know.
Through water that sometimes comes up to our waists, water contaminated with oil, chemicals, and garbage. We trudge about a mile into the neighborhood. Homes are inundated, badly damaged. Some are completely overturned.
You're Doreen's husband?
We meet Doreen Regal's husband, Roger, also a caretaker of the mobile homes, who couldn't get to that couple. He's shaken by the condition of his neighborhood.
There's a lot of damage. A lot of damage.
We finally make it to the home of Edith and Ed Nalepa. She's 88. He's 93 and has Parkinson's and diabetes. The water is lapping the front door of their trailer. The alarm of their flooded car is buzzing.
Do you want us to call the fire department or the police department?
No. We're fine. We're doing good.
Edith says they knew they'd probably have flooding. We ask why they didn't leave when most of their neighbors did.
Difficulty taking care of my husband. We have he does good here at home. He has all of his medications and everything. Just easier.
And a question we often ask of disaster victims like Edith and Ed. Do they want to continue to live in a place so devastated?
Yeah, we love it here. We've been here 27 years. This is home.
Now, we repeatedly offered Ed and Edith Nalepa food and water. We offered to call the fire and police departments for them. We offered to carry them out of that neighborhood. They repeatedly said, no, they're fine. They have enough supplies for days. Edith told us they also have flood insurance, so she's very optimistic about how this is going to turn out. The mayor of Bonita Springs told us they are still trying to get to neighborhoods like the Nalepas with fire and rescue crews just to see who needs help and who might be injured tonight, Wolf.
Yeah, what a story that is. Brian Todd on the scene for us. Brian, good work. Thank you so much. Let's get an update on the conditions just a bit north in Naples, which was thrashed by Hurricane Irma. We're joined by the city manager, Bill Moss. Bill, thanks so much for joining us. As you know, Naples is facing right now enormous cleanup. Most of the city is still without power. What are your most urgent needs?
Well, Wolf, we had all of our employees stationed here in the city all day yesterday and throughout the storm so that we were able to mobilize quickly at daybreak this morning. And our priority was to clear streets of downed trees and tree limbs so that we could provide police and fire rescue and medical services to our community, and more importantly, so that we could allow our residents to return to the city as close as possible. So today we made great progress. We did have tidal surge, but it did not approach the levels that were predicted. This storm was somewhat unusual. We were right at the eye wall. We experienced the eye of the hurricane, but on the backside, the winds dropped down dramatically, and that spared us the worst of the storm surge. So we had surge of about 3 feet, but it did not cause any flooding of structures that we've been able to determine so far. Some apartment buildings lost their roofs, and we've had to relocate people to other city facilities, our community center. But generally speaking, there is not a lot of structural damage, although the landscape damage is just very, very significant.
How many people are without power?
Well, in our city of 20,000, almost all of them are without power. Many are without water because when the trees get uprooted, they also break the water mains. So we're in the process of repairing those and getting water restored to everybody. With about 4 million people without power in Florida, we have no expectation that power will resume anytime soon. So we're telling our citizens that those that are here and those that evacuated and are returning, that they may be enjoying 90-degree temperatures without air conditioning for days or even weeks.
Weeks, is that what they're saying, before you get power, before you get clean water?
and that's been our experience. Now, Florida Power and Light serves this area, and they do have crews out, but there's just so much work to do and so many power lines are down. So between our community and places throughout Florida, it's just going to be a major effort.
So what should people be doing who have homes there in Naples?
Well, if we're urging people to stay where they are if they did evacuate, but if they come back, they're just going to have to be used to some fairly tough conditions. That seems to be the only option for now.
Good luck to all the people in Naples. Bill Moss, you're the city manager. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our breaking news coverage continues next. We're going to have much more on the threat Irma is posing as the storm moves north. Plus, we're getting some new details of its devastating impact in Florida.
A few minutes ago, as JFRD brought them out on the boat, it was a family of 3 on that boat. I spoke with them. JFRD, or they had told me that they had actually taken some of their items and put them up on higher ground. Again, we know there's going to be high tide here, so the water will continue to rise, but you can just see them being taken in that boat. They'll actually be taking them to an intersection, a couple we are trying to get to. The water is just so deep right now, but we're trying to get to that area where they're being taken, because when they get there, that's where they're taking a lot of people, and some of them may go to shelters, I'm being told. So, but I spoke with one JFRD rescuer. This is the big point here. Asked him if everybody was okay that he'd seen here in San Marco. He said yes. So that's certainly good news. As for their property, we're still waiting on talking to some people here. JFRD was going around knocking on doors just to see. I'm told we may have some sound now with some of the people on that boat. Let's hear what they had to say. I was walking with them, talking with them after they were rescued. How are you? That's what the most important thing.
We're fine. Actually, I live down in Miramar, but my daughter and her best friend have an apartment here, and we came down to make sure everything was up on the second floor before the floodwaters rose all the way up. So mission accomplished, and these great guys are giving us a boat ride back.
Yeah, because this water is disgusting, right? You don't want to even mess with it. So I can walk with you guys if you guys are. I know you guys have.
Awesome.
I'll move with you guys.
Yeah.
So you guys put everything up on the second floor, right?
That's right.
How many days ago did you do that?
About 10 minutes ago. That's why we were down here. We were actually safe and sound, but we walked back down through this river to make sure that everything was up on the second floor, because we just didn't think it was going to come up 5 feet.
Was this, if I can ask you guys real quick, was this more than you guys ever expected?
Oh, for sure. It always floods here, but we thought that, the house would be okay. We put sandbags up, so we thought that would be enough, and then my friend sent me a picture of what the street looks like, and it definitely was higher than anticipated.
All right, you heard that there, and they are in good spirits. They were okay, just protecting some of their stuff, as the 2 girls there live in this apartment over here, just trying to make sure their stuff was on higher ground and okay, because this took them by surprise, as it took a lot of people by surprise. And we do know that because of high tide coming soon, waters will continue to rise here in San Marco. I do want to show you just again setting the scene, as we do expect more JFRD crews to come in, and we got to watch our step here. As the water's mostly remained about knee-high here, although it gets even deeper over here. But just debris, trash cans floating in the water, all kinds of garbage here. This is actually Naldo Avenue and Cedar Street. And again, the concern in areas like this and downtown as well is that water levels will continue to rise with high tide coming soon. And we'll keep you posted. We're trying to get to those areas where more people are being rescued to make sure they're okay. And when we learn more, we'll bring that to you, of course, on air and on social media and on our Action News Jax mobile app. But for now, we're live in San Marco. Kevin Clark, CBS 47, Fox 30, Action News Jax.
Now that it's starting to clear up a little bit, we're starting to see the after effects of what was Hurricane Irma. Take a look at this. I am standing in the middle of the Ramona Street, about, calf-high water. This gas station behind me has completely flooded. There are cars submerged over there in that parking lot. It is really amazing to see. I've seen cars trying to drive through this. Would not recommend doing that. Got to be careful where we step. There's a looks like a little part of a sidewalk here, TJ, so if you walk over this way, do not trip. I've seen trucks trying to go through this as well. You know, they might fend off a little better in these types of conditions. There's a little sewer grate here. TJ, walk this way over here with me. Take it slow. This is unbelievable. There is a bench right here. I'm getting water all in my boots. If I sit on this bench, I'm basically sitting in water. This is how high it is. It is crazy to see. Walk over this way with me, TJ. You have people just walking out here, taking in the sights after Hurricane Irma. All right, you're all right. Come this way. There's some grass, a little, I think I feel a sidewalk right here. I don't even know what I'm stepping on. Come on, keep coming with me. You see these cars back here? I want to check and make sure no one's in there. Might take us a little bit to get there. Come on, TJ. Keep on coming. Oh my goodness, it's just filling my boots. I've committed. I'm already in the water. Come on. Hey there. Be safe. Is this what is this? Is this a door? Or this plywood? What is this? Okay, this is what you have to be careful about when you walk through here. There are nails in this. This looks like it's part of the sign. Yep, part of the sign. Now, what was up there to my right?
Wow. Your residents achieving access just before we did. I want you to see some of these trees that have come down. Overall, the damage not as substantial as you would think on a barrier island, but take a look at how large some of these trees that actually came down were. Massive roots, huge old trees blocking several of the roads here. We want you to see some drone footage of the island. Again, this is a barrier island over Tampa. You have no idea, Wolf, just how much we have been seeing here. There's water, there's a little bit of stuff, but overall, I spoke to some homeowners and they said that they were expecting once they were allowed back on the island, well, not to even have a home. They thought everything was going to be gone. They figured that this was going to be, as it is called, a barrier for the Tampa area, and that when they got, they wouldn't have homes. But for the most part, they say that they've a little bit of shingles, maybe some roof is gone. We're basically just seeing trees like this one. And while it is impressive and large, again, the people who live here, while they still do not have power and are not sure when they're going to get it, thought to return home to far worse than they did.
All right, Diane, thank you. Diane Gallagher on the road for us. Appreciate it. Much more on the breaking news coverage right after this.
See how deep it is, about 500 feet, where the banks of the St. John should be right now at what we are told is high tide. You look over to the right here, there's a Hyatt Regency that is completely closed. There's nobody staying there. There are a few staff that have been left behind, and you can see why from this angle a little bit better than where we were before. There are a couple of feet of water that are blocking any way that you would get into that hotel, basically, by foot or by car. We just saw the utility company go in to this building. They've been checking things out all up and down this block. It looks like if the water holds right now, that high tide is here, this is about as high as it's going to go, which should spare many of the businesses on Bay Street. But with the wind still coming in, you know, Jacksonville, nobody really talked about as being one of the places that the storm was going to hit as hard as it did, but you get a sense of how fast the wind came through here earlier today, late last night. Trees like this uprooted. They were uprooted like this in the lanes of I-10 East as we headed here from Alabama this morning. There's a lot of that, obviously a lot of water, and now we wait to see how high it is in the rest of the city that we haven't been able to get to because we just have a car. We don't have a boat, and we wait to see how long it's going to take to clean up big trees like this one, Shep.
Peter Ducey there for us. West of you in Lake City, we were just looking at some brand new pictures that had come in from there. there's some pretty extreme flooding where Interstate 10 meets Interstate 75, which is significantly west of Jacksonville, and all throughout Duval County we've been watching. This is Action News Jacksonville's Skycam up above, and this is looking at Orlando. Let's listen live.
A live look now, and you can see just that damage, that just a car appears to be almost into the door of the home. Looks like maybe they tried to park in a driveway. I don't know if the winds knocked them there or if they tried to park to kind of get some shelter from those winds. But a look at the damage from Orlando. We expect to see more images coming out like this.
All right. We appear to lose Kaylee Hartung, who's in Jacksonville right now. As fate would have it, as I'm standing here in Miami talking about the destruction that Hurricane Irma caused here, a friend of mine in Charleston, South Carolina, texted me, showed me a picture of what's going on outside his window. Charleston is getting hammered right now. Joining us on the phone is the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, John Tecklenburg. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us right now. I just saw a photo of a boat pushed up on shore from the flooding that's happening in Charleston. Give me an assessment of what you're seeing.
Well, thank you, John. We've got a lot of water here, and it's kind of counterintuitive that a hurricane over in the western part of Georgia would have a 4-foot storm surge in Charleston, South Carolina, but that's exactly what is happening because the wind is pushing the water towards us, and unfortunately it happened right at high tide. And so right now, high tide just passed, but we had 10 feet above mean low water level, and so the battery was breached, and many of our low-lying areas are experiencing flooding right now.
I think we are all learning from Hurricane Irma just how sort of shifty storm surge can be. It's not always where you think it's going to be. It's often trailing a storm. It's often at the other end of the storm. It's a tough lesson to have to learn. My friend, again, told me he was nervous that the flooding in Charleston might be about the same as it was in Hurricane Hugo. That's a very, very scary level right now. Do you get a sense of how much damage there is?
Well, not yet. In comparison, I will say that last year, Hurricane Matthew did not have as much flooding in our historic district and low-lying areas, and that's because just the chance that Matthew came into town at low tide rather than high tide. So that 6-foot tidal difference really makes a huge difference. But we're ready and prepared for recovery as soon as this thing passes, and we're going to get cleaned up in short order, and then we're going to welcome anyone from Florida that wants to come up and visit. And our hearts and prayers just go out for all the damage and loss that's occurring down in Florida.
Our coverage of Irma continues in just a moment, but there's also breaking news on North Korea we're following right now. The United Nations Security Council has just unanimously approved new sanctions on North Korea in response to its increasingly aggressive nuclear weapons program. CNN's Will Ripley is in the North Korean capital of Pyongyang right now. His 15th trip to
dealing with it up there. I think we do have Kaylee Hartung in Jacksonville, which did have flooding, we were told, that they haven't seen since the 1800s. Kaylee.
Yeah, John, nobody here has ever seen anything like this. The waters of the St. Johns River rolling into downtown. And this is the definition of storm surge as we know it. The winds pushing the river into these streets. That's a marina right over there. I mean, that's just 2 blocks away from me. The St. Johns River just dumping in to downtown. We've been saying all morning long, as bad as it looked in Jacksonville, it would get worse. Well, now we're at that hour that we were looking towards, 2 o'clock, high tide here, and officials saying waters could rise 8 inches more. These historic floods that they're seeing here, those records keep on breaking with every hour, and it feels like with every gust of wind that we get here, we felt gusts up to 70, 75 miles an hour here, some that'll just knock you right off your feet. And it has been surprising to me with every person I've seen here to spectate, like these folks to my left. They survived Irma, and they are very proud of it, John. But the most troubling thing I've seen were people actually wading through these waters. We spoke with a man earlier who waded for blocks in water up to his waist just because he wanted to experience what was going on downtown and thought that was the best vantage point to get it. We don't advise anybody of doing such a thing because, as officials tell us, these waters will continue to rise, and that's the threat here. These gusts of wind aren't allowing anyone to be safe in these waters, and as you said, you just don't know how quickly the scenario in here can change. I'm looking at a tree right here where I don't know if from this vantage point we've got a good view of the roots, but this second tree down here just hanging on by its roots, and with these powerful gusts that we're feeling, any one of them could carry that right out. Now, what's also interesting about our location here, right in the middle of downtown Jacksonville, this is the Omni Hotel to my left. A lot of people from this area, from Jacksonville Beach, from Ponte Vedra, from places that were really concerned right on the water of what this storm would bring, they came here for safety, John. But now these waters getting pretty close to the doors of that hotel as these waters continue to rise. And the wind continues to blow.
Yeah. Oh, Kaylee, please take care of yourself. Yeah, Irma as a storm created this guessing game. People tried to go where they might be safe, and in some cases it just turned out to be another target for that storm. Kaylee Hartung up in Jacksonville, seeing these floods, which are not over yet. Please, folks, stay careful up there before this passes. I want to go over now to the west coast of Florida, to Naples, which took a really heavy hit from the eye of Hurricane Irma. Our team was there all yesterday. You saw Chris Cuomo literally in the eye of the storm for some time after being hit by 140-mile-an-hour winds. On the phone with me now is Bill Barnett, the mayor of Naples. And Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. And I know it's hard to get a sense of just how bad the damage is. It does take some time. But I do hear you are finally having some data to tell us about. What have you learned?
Well, and I'd like to make a really quick statement about people wading in hurricane waters just to because they wanted the experience. That's just doesn't make any sense. That's insane. But anyway, the damage here that we've assessed so far is literally minor compared to what I've been listening to you and hearing about our neighbors over in Miami and up in Jacksonville, et cetera. But, ours was a lot of downed trees, flooding. We have neighborhoods that aren't open yet that you can't get to. Our newly rebuilt pier that's only a couple of years old took a serious structural hit. And, of course, adding the no power, and everybody is in the same boat there, doesn't make it any easier with the temperatures that we have here. Not a lot of structural, very, very minimal structural, but so water pipe breaks, water main breaks, just, and it's sad. But in perspective, the fact that we did not get that storm surge because the back end of that storm dissipated, that would have been catastrophic to us. So that's it in a nutshell.
Record flooding, more than 6 million without power at this hour. Irma now slamming into Georgia and the Carolinas. Plus, they left their home in the Keys for safer ground. And days later, no one has heard from this Florida couple. We're going to talk to the missing woman's desperate sister. And a vacation to an island paradise turning into a nightmare. My guest describes his very narrow escape from death. Let's go out front. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, Irma's deadly impact tonight. The effects of this historic hurricane are still being felt at this hour beyond Florida. These are live pictures out of South Carolina. Irma's powerful storm surge leaving roads across the state under several feet of water. And in Florida tonight, historic flooding. The storm surge in Jacksonville worse than anyone expected, in fact, shattering the previous flooding record, which was set back in 1964. The wall of water inundating homes and businesses. Moments ago, Tallahassee issuing a storm surge warning as well. And as we look at these pictures coming in from across the state, you can see the grim extent of Hurricane Irma. Thousands are homeless, waiting right now for the okay to try to go home to see what is left of home. In the Florida Keys, waterfront homes were ripped apart by Irma's winds, about 130 miles an hour there. Canals littered with debris. At this hour in the Keys, a search is underway for those who didn't make it out. And further north in Naples, entire neighborhoods are uninhabitable at this hour. Statewide, the numbers from officials are tough to grasp. As I said, more than 6 million people without power right now. That means food, fuel, Also water, right now scarce, as they desperately try to get the power on and stores reopened. The power, though, we understand, in parts of Florida could be out for weeks. Also tonight, the situation growing more dire in Cuba. The sun is now setting. I mean, look at those images there of people in the water. Rescuers are desperately trying to locate the missing. Some are crushed by buildings which have collapsed. We don't know a death toll right now, at least 10 at this hour, as far as we know, and that number could go up. We have our team of reporters, of course, across Florida and the rest of the country in the hardest hit areas. We begin with Bill Weir, who is out front in the Florida Keys. And Bill, really, this is going to be the heart of it all, as they are even able to get into the deep areas of the Keys. What is the situation there?
Well, that's it. There's so much uncertainty, Aaron. The search and rescue mission underway. The people don't know if their loved ones got swept away or just incommunicado, because there's no power south of about mile marker 85. Well, no power at all, but no cell service south of 85. So 85 miles of dead zone, and the Keys are closed. I never thought I'd say that. And I never thought, you never think, looking at how calm the Atlantic Ocean is today, that it could do this kind of destruction. Spin around and see what happens to it built without foundations. And look at this. This just struck me as a couple symbols. Eat, sleep, fish. That is the sort of credo of the conchs who live in this part of the world. But now, sadly, this is the new symbol. That's the search and rescue sign that on 9/11, an infamous date at 2:08, they searched this home, found 0 bodies inside. Hopefully all of these people got out. You'd think they would, given how tenuous these places are. Now, as I mentioned before, the search and rescue operation is the main thing. You can hear the helicopter. There's one going overhead now. We just saw a caravan of first responders, including an engine from the Los Angeles Fire Department. It is the cavalry is coming from all over, including the U.S. Navy sending an aircraft carrier down to Key West with humanitarian aid. They're trying to inspect the bridges on this 43-mile chain as fast as they can. About half of those were completed by 4 o'clock today. You can imagine that's a big job. Trying to get the road open, trying to get the power back on are all intense things. But, you know, this storm will be measured in billions and billions of dollars, Aaron, but there's so much that you can't measure. The lives scattered, the family photos, the children's books I've seen here. It is just staggering when you try to take in the scope. And we haven't even gotten south yet, which we will do tomorrow morning, getting on a boat to go see the hardest hit areas.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. I think you really brought it home there. And you see those X's on the doors. Of course, the X is a good sign. It means no one was found inside. But to imagine, to see those numbers, 9/11 on the door, is the day that we are starting to assess this damage, being this day in American history. I want to go to Ed Lavandera now. We go, of course, Ed, from the Keys, and Bill, to you, where Marco Island, where Hurricane Irma then made the next landfall. And what do you see there, Ed?
Well, we're on the eastern edge of Marco Island. This is Goodland, Florida, a speck of a fishing village. If you look on the map, sits between the Everglades and the Gulf of Mexico. And as you mentioned, Aaron, Hurricane Irma made its second landfall here as a Category 3 storm. 130-mile-per-hour winds, gusts at times reaching up to 140. And officials tell us that some 40 people rode that storm out here in this town. Gary Stringer lives in this red house you see here behind me. Talked to him a little while ago. He was in one of those front rooms as the worst in the eye of the storm was coming, just sawing its way through this community. He says the house was rattling. He could hear this crackling sound. And when he looked out of the side door, he realized that it was this giant tree. And because it was the north side of the storm, the wind was blowing east to west. Had it been the other direction, this entire tree would have landed on top of his home. And Gary tells us that he probably wouldn't have been doing that interview with us if that had happened to him. He said, he actually joked around, Aaron, it was kind of funny. He said, this is a town called Goodland. He said, oftentimes they joke that it's called Gunna Land. He said, I was gonna evacuate, but I didn't get around to it. And so he says he will never do this again. This Category 3 storm was enough for him. As we have driven around this community, several hundred people call this community, it's a fishing village, several hundred people call this area home. It's definitely one of the hardest hit areas that we've seen here in Southwest Florida. Trees and power lines down everywhere, a number of homes destroyed. The scene actually, you know, rather catastrophic here in this small town. We've seen people throughout the day coming back, try to assess the damage, people who evacuated and now trying to get back in here tonight. Aaron?
All right, Ed, thank you very much. And, you know, as we said, the storm is still continuing, and we've got these deadly storm surges in Jacksonville, historic flooding. Kaylee Hartung is there. And, Kaylee, this really has people scrambling throughout the day.
It did, Aaron. It was one of the biggest surprises that Hurricane Irma brought to Florida when the waters of the St. Johns River started rolling up right here down into the streets of downtown Jacksonville. Record levels were being broken at every point in the day. At the water's peak today, at high tide around 2 o'clock, waters were 5.5 feet above what they typically are at that high tide time. I wouldn't have dared hours ago been standing where I am now. This is one of the many entry points where you can see the waters of this river lapping up over the seawall here and heading into downtown. Now, since that high tide peak, well, the waters have receded some, but you can see the visuals of the damage here. This a floating dock that normally would be rising and falling with the height of the water. The water, that storm surge came up so strong, it broke those floating docks to the point where they are pushed up against that wall, unable to bob with the water as you would expect it to. Now, these waters, as I said, have begun to recede, but in speaking with the mayor just a short while ago, he said, don't be fooled by that. You may see pockets where the streets will dry out, but when you think about how far back this water was at one point, 3 blocks into downtown, 3 blocks that way, and the other direction to me, you just don't know where this water can go. And Governor Rick Scott has said in the coming days, the floodwaters from these storm surges in northern Florida will be of the biggest concern. Aaron, the folks in Jacksonville believe that.
Yeah, so they're not saying that it's safe, and as the tide goes out now, the storm is past. That's the bottom line, right, Kaylee?
That is the bottom line. And you can see spectators all around me. We've seen this all day, even when the floodwaters were nearly up to my waist. But officials here saying go up, not out. These floodwaters are still incredibly dangerous, Aaron.
All right, Kaylee, thank you very much from Jacksonville. And out front now, Roman Gastizzi. He is the Monroe County Administrator. That includes the Florida Keys. Now, Roman, you know, at the beginning of our program, we were talking about the Florida Keys, and obviously the bridges aren't all inspected. There's no power. There's no cell service. We just don't know. We just don't know what happened there, and we don't know whether the people that did choose to stay are okay. What are you hearing right now?
Well, that is exactly right. First of all, thank you for having me. Well, you know, we're getting down to the Keys, and we're having a recovery effort, and the sheriff's folks are out. The various police departments are out. The streets are starting to get cleared. And we're starting our recovery process, and that's where we're at. We're also concerned about folks wanting to come down. Luckily, we have a way to control that. We have a control point up at the top of the northern part of the Florida Keys, and we're controlling access. We only want essential folks to come down that can help us in the recovery. It's creating a lot of frustration because people want to get home and see their homes and see their boats and stuff. But, you know, I think sometime tomorrow we'll probably let them in. We haven't established that yet, but especially in the Upper Keys, we'll probably do it by zones, let them in the Upper Keys where things are a little better off. And then, you know, the next day or two, we'll allow everybody to go in. The Florida Department of Transportation has looked at the bridges, and they're looking pretty good.
And that's a good thing, that the bridges are looking good. Obviously, some of the images we've seen, at least for the northern part, where things weren't hit as hard, are pretty devastating. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming. Is everyone accounted for in the southern parts of the Keys, or you must still not know? There have to be a lot of questions, right?
Yes, there's still a lot of questions, like you say. We're getting a lot of emails and a lot of texts and things, people saying that their loved ones haven't checked in. And like you reported early on, most of the Keys are in the dark. I mean, it's just black, you know. So it's very frustrating. No internet service, no cell phone service. And the irony is that the few people that have landlines, good old-fashioned landlines, those are the folks that we're able to talk to.
Wow. Just says something right there. Now, you know, you're talking about controlling access, Roman, and obviously Highway 1 is really the only road, right, that runs from the mainland to Key West. It's said to be underwater in parts, and I know you're checking the bridges. But is the road going to be okay?
It is. It's not that bad a shape. There's a couple spots that have pretty bad, but the crews have already put some sand and things over it and kind of compacted it and made it passable. So that's the key. So right now, I think we can report that it's passable. It's not perfect, but it's passable. And it's 120 miles, of roads connected by 43 bridges. Yeah. So it's a lot of work, and I think we'll get there. There's no doubt that we will bounce back.
Well, that's a pretty incredible a feat that would be okay. And I know, as we said, half those bridges are checked. They're doing okay so far. So that's miraculous as well. I want to ask you, Roman, though, our reporters on the Keys at various places are reporting, obviously, a shortage of gas, but also other supplies. Are you getting what you need, right? If there are people in there who are trapped, are they going to be able to are they getting food, water?
Yes, things are running low. There's no doubt about that. But we have a couple C-130s coming in today down to Key West. They've been great. The military's been great. The state departments have been great. So we'll get the supplies needed down here, no doubt.
All right. Well, Roman, I appreciate your time. Good luck tomorrow. I know it's going to be a crucial day. And our thoughts are with those who are right now in the dark zone, that we're going to hear from them and they're safe. Thanks.
Thank you.
And next, this Florida couple was actually in the Keys when Irma hit. You see them there, but no one has heard from them. I'm going to speak with a relative who is desperately trying to find
a local official called the destruction in parts of the Keys a humanitarian crisis. Police have blocked off US 1, the only way in and out of the Keys on the overseas highway, until crews can inspect the damage and make sure bridges are safe.
Shep, it looks like the water has started to recede. It started to leave the streets and go back into the banks of the St. Johns. But you look, there is a big, deep mess here in this street, which runs between two giant corporate office buildings and into the Jacksonville Landing, which is one of the hottest spots in town, we're told. There is shopping, there are restaurants, there are bars, and right now it is completely inaccessible except by boat. We saw somebody come out, they said that there is a lot of water in the area around it, but you really can't, I mean, there's no way for us to get over there because we don't have a boat. Again, as the water is starting to recede, there are some people who are starting to come out because the rain really hasn't been that bad here, at least for the last couple hours. But the wind has been significant. You can see that because there is a little bit of a current here. And now we are waiting to hear from some of the suburbs about potential rescues. Shep.
Johns River. David, what are the conditions like where you are?
Stephanie, we're in the Riverside neighborhood. We're right along the St. Johns River. Take a look at this condo complex. Look at the water. The front door has come off. There's probably, I'd say, it's waist deep, nearly chest deep. And that's the St. Johns River right there. I have never seen a river roll into a neighborhood quite like this. And it's been doing this since 9 a.m. this morning. The wind is ferocious right now. And forget the fact that the high tide moved in and should have died down within probably the last hour. It has simply not let up. I mean, what an incredible sight. You don't know where the barrier is, where the river stops and where the neighborhood starts. It simply has come through. We got here about 2 hours ago. Rescue crews first moved in this morning around, I'd say, 5 a.m. One of the first rescue crews came in. That's what we've been told. And they started rescuing people. Look, this neighborhood is known to flood, but never this bad. That's what we're hearing from people who live in the area. In fact, we just passed by a home that belongs to a 78-year-old man. At around 1 a.m. this morning, he told us, I had a feeling something was about to get pretty bad. So he got in his car, left his wife at home, and drove to the nearby hospital. It's probably 2 or 3 minutes away. And he slept in his car at the hospital because by the time he came back to his house, he knew he couldn't get back in. He was trying to leave his car at the hospital on higher ground, but sure enough, slept in his car all night and flagged down the man who's driving the vehicle that we're riding on and said, hey, can you help me? I want to go check on my wife. Roll the tape.
This area normally floods. We took one car down in the afternoon.
Yeah, she's there. And then about 1 o'clock, I could hear the rain was coming and coming and coming. I said, I don't believe it. I'm going to have to make a second trip. She said, how are you going to get back? I said, I won't. I'll just stay in the car overnight. The sun comes up and I'll drive home. Only when the sun came up, this is what was there. So I waited, and then went out looking for, well, I don't want to hold you guys up.
Yeah, what was it like in that car as the wind was?
Stand by. So we're back live in the Riverside neighborhood of Jacksonville, and you see the people who are standing where there is no water. These are folks who live in the area, right? Again, everybody.
Widespread the destruction is. It is, though, very clear that it will take years to recover from Irma. Miguel Marquez is out front in Punta Gorda, Florida. And Miguel, how are people there coping with just trying to get the first sense of how awful this was?
Well, they were fairly lucky here because that storm was headed straight for Punta Gorda, and then it turned off to the right or off to the east, and the brunt of it didn't get through here. But still, look at the sort of damage. This tree, probably 100 years old or so. The house that it's right next to, amazingly enough, it fell and basically only brushed the house. But this town is cleaning up and trying to recover while Irma is still churning.
Hurricane Irma slamming Florida. Heavy rains, strong winds, and it is still on the move, making its way up the southeastern edge of the U.S. Now weakened to a tropical storm, the danger not yet over. Streets flooded from the Florida Keys to South Carolina. Tonight, more than 6.5 million people are without power in Florida alone. Jacksonville hit with a record Irma-generated surge, turning its streets into rivers. Storm surge warnings in effect for much of the western Florida coast and the entire Georgia coast. Charleston now feeling Irma's wrath as waves crash onto its shores. Ripping through the middle of Florida late Sunday, Irma battered the entire state with sustained winds and massive wind gusts. Rescue efforts continue for those who stayed to wait out the storm. In Martin County, Florida's Treasure Coast, a Marine unit dispatched after 2 people tried to ride out the storm on their sailboat. They survived. And a scuba diver, his life dangling by a rope, rescued near West Palm Beach. The storm delivering more than just destruction. Coral Springs emergency crews were called out to help deliver a baby in the height of the storm, using their armored vehicle to navigate through strong winds and high water.
When we got there, she was pretty much almost all the way out. The mother of the person in labor was actually pretty much delivering the baby, her own granddaughter, in the bathroom on the floor.
Wow.
And I've never met or seen a more calm scene in the chaos that was going on outside.
Miami's streets flooded and left with huge sinkholes, leaving hazardous conditions as cars try to steer through the murky waters. The cost of the damages yet to be assessed. One estimate, it will top Hurricane Katrina even before it hit Florida.
Now, one of the biggest issues here in Punta Gorda and across the county of Charlotte is electricity, like much of the state. About 40% of the people still don't have electricity, but that's decent. 65% this morning didn't have electricity. The problem is trees like this came down everywhere. Wires, electrical lines came down in neighborhood after neighborhood. So you go from one place to another, and there's no neighborhood street to street. It's going to be a long time before they're fully recovered. Aaron?
All right, Miguel, thank you. And of course, right now, when you talk about recovery, it is also about just finding people. With the power out, the cell phone service out, it is impossible in some cases. Tonight, one woman desperately trying to find her sister and brother-in-law. Terry Shaw Perez and Carlos Perez were last heard from on Saturday night. They were staying at a friend's house on Big Pine Key, which was hit hard by the storm. And out front now is Terry Shaw Perez's sister, Amy Fridley. And Amy, thank you. Look, we know there's a lot of power issues and cell phone issues. I know you were in touch with your sister throughout the day on Saturday as the storm was coming. When was the last time you heard from her, and what did she tell you at that time?
The last time I spoke with her was shortly after 7 p.m. Saturday night. The last thing she said was they were getting ready to go into a small closet underneath the stairs.
And so they knew this was going to be scary. I know they had gone to a place, higher elevation, as much as one could say that in the Keys. Amy, look, I know so many people are without power and cell phone service in the Keys. No one has been able to get in there. So hopefully they're fine and they're just not able to communicate with you. But this wait must be agonizing.
It's very stressful. I'm praying it's just a cell phone issue. I need my sister. And I just want some contact. We had a short video call that on the 9th also, and there was a moment where her and I just looked at each other and kind of stared at each other for a minute. And, we have a really strong bond, and we just stared at each other and kind of, stared, and we knew it was going to be bad. But I just keep going back to that moment, And
I know, just seeing her face, of course. Do you, I know obviously she's wherever she is, and we all are hoping, of course, that she is safe, and it's just a cell phone issue, a power issue right now in terms of your communication. So she's probably not seeing this, obviously. But if you could get a message to her right now, Amy, what would it be?
I would tell her that, I love you, and I'm not going to stop, and I'll find you, bring you home.
And Amy,